Mississippi's thoroughly Republican-controlled House voted earlier this week to set up a new system for choosing now what will be unelected leaders and judges in Jackson. Why would they want to do this? Well, Mississippi is one kind of thing and Jackson is a different type of thing. We're gonna read some numbers to see if you can figure out why they might want to have more control over it. Jackson, the city, is 82.5% black or African American, whereas Mississippi overall is 59% white. Now, the demographics and political identity are not a one-to-one thing, but we know that generally big cities in conservative rural areas tend to be more democratic. They don't necessarily vote the way that the rest of the city does. You see this in other places, including Atlanta, in Georgia, and all that. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you controlled the state, but couldn't or didn't want to appeal to the voters in a particular city to just choose their leaders for them instead? That would be convenient. It wouldn't be democratic, but it would be convenient. So here's what they want to do. The proposal is HB 1020. It's been put forth by GOP backers as a measure to increase public safety and reduce backlogs in the courts. But local leaders have argued the measure is a power grab from the state's largely conservative white legislature against the majority black population of Jackson. Representative Ed Blackmon, a Democrat, says only in Mississippi would we have a bill like this, where we say solving the problem requires removing the vote from black people. I noticed that this bill does not address part of the problem, which is lack of funding at that crime lab, one of the parts that they talk about in the bill. You're blaming Jackson because they can't process their cases fast enough because the crime lab is not operating at capacity because we don't give them the money. He added that the measure, which would allow state officials to appoint judges and prosecutors instead of the usual local process of electing them, wouldn't do anything to reduce crime, which makes sense. Unless you're making the case that for some reason, the voters elect judges and prosecutors that work slower than you would, it seems like you're almost intentionally not trying to solve the problem. But this is a great solution to ongoing problems from the point of view of the right. They had to do a lot of work over many decades to strip voting places out of these cities, to gerrymander and split up districts and all that. It's a long, gradual process to erode someone's political power. Just taking it entirely away and saying you don't get to choose your leaders anymore, we'll choose them for you. Oh, and we're also not going to provide any funding to actually speed up the process of adjudicating cases and things like that. It seems, Brett, almost too brazen, but I think it's an ambitious experiment. What do you think?
No. Sometimes the obvious answer is just too easy, John. Funding, like if what they say of the problem can be fixed by funding the crime lab to speed things up, that's too easy. It just makes sense, and that's why we shouldn't ever do it. This is insane. They say that democracy is bad. Now, that is directly related to there's a lot of lies told about critical race theory. There's a lot of lies told about the pointing out structural racism. This is structural racism. They are changing the structure of the society really, so that a group that is a minority in a specific location, the whites, can have power over the majority in that situation, in that area. It is insanely brazen, but the problem is that in these states, typically what happens is this would be ruled unconstitutional at normally a state level before it gets to the national level. But in these states, they have gerrymandered the districts so much that they are able to rewrite the state constitution to make it a crazy town. And in that crazy town, they are doing another cliche, which is allowing the politicians to pick the voters. But in this case, they're not even picking the voters, they're picking themselves instead of letting the people choose the politicians.
Yeah, 100%. I don't see how this could possibly stand, except that the state Supreme Court will allow it, and God only knows what will happen with the SCOTUS. SCOTUS has made a couple of decisions over the past few years that were not exactly what I would have predicted. Generally, in areas where a decision could specifically protect Trump, they haven't been as defensive of him as you would have predicted. But when it comes to the right-wing social culture war stuff, they're pretty much who you'd expect them to be. And here's the thing: if they just do this in Mississippi, that is bad enough. It is, as they are pointing out. I believe the mayor said they're looking to colonize Jackson. They're trying to put their military force over Jackson, try to dictate who has province over Jackson, while they simultaneously introduce a bill at how they can remove elected officials in Jackson. It reminds me of colonial power where they dictate who is our leadership. Totally right to say that. But you don't think that like the rest of the like Republicans around the country are looking at this and thinking, man, that would be really convenient in Atlanta. And honestly, Austin, pretty liberal for Texas. So it would be great if we could choose their local leaders as well. And right now their claim is that this will expedite cases and stuff. But they're gonna start to throw in other stuff. No, we have concerns about how elections have typically been run there. And so, for concerns over electoral fraud and all that, we're just gonna choose their mayor from now on. Maybe it won't go that far. Maybe it'll just be a horrendous anti-democratic thing that they're doing to the good people of Mississippi and of Jackson. But this is the sort of thing that Alec could very well run with. And so I would be worried about this. If you live in a traditionally red state that has areas that are much more democratic, especially if they're majority minority, then you should definitely have this on your radar.
Right, and the answer to your question, or the next step is they'll take it as far as they can. That's it. That's the answer to all of this. They're taking it as far as they can. This kind of movement took itself into the halls of Congress to overthrow a democratic election. If you're asking, and it's so ironic that it's so contemptible and horrible that these folks typically are the ones who say, we gotta protect ourselves with these rifles against the tyrannies of government. They're the ones who are perpetrating the tyrannies of government. They are going in and choosing leaders for areas they don't like. And they don't like them because they're picking their own leaders? It's insane, and they're starving them in another way. They're cutting off funding to a crime lab.
Well, and to theoretically justify the decision that they're making. Like, don't help them out. Don't help them in the wake of disasters. Don't help them in the wake of the admittedly high level of crime there, and then use the chaos or whatever the situation that you've helped to encourage to take away the remaining rights of the people in that area.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.